Paul, man or myth? In this video, we're going to be evaluating whether the Apostle Paul was real or mythical in nature. But first, we need to establish a framework that will allow us to decide if a character is real or is mythical. So, before we jump into a discussion of the historicity of Paul, let us first establish a framework to evaluate what could be mythical versus real in nature. We can then use this framework to evaluate any other character from the Bible, and even from other religious texts. Okay, so without any further ado, let's jump into the construction of a framework to evaluate whether a character is real or mythical. Number 1. Are there multiple sources talking about the character, or is there just one main source, and do the multiple sources agree with each other? If there is just one source, or if the multiple sources don't agree with each other, the character is likely to be mythical. Number 2. Does the character have many supernatural or superhuman traits, or was the character involved in many supernatural or superhuman events? The more supernatural or superhuman traits a character has, or is associated with, the greater the chance that the character is mythical. Number 3. Are the human origins of the character verifiable or not? A lack of evidence of real human origin suggests a character might be mythical, because it means that the authors were unable to find information about the character's human origins, or alternatively, were unable to drum up a convincing story about their human origins. Number 4. Does the character's life story look like it's been written to fill a literary objective, or does it appear natural and spontaneous, as we'd expect for an everyday, normal person? If the character's life story sounds contrived, as if it's been written to fill a literary objective, the character is likely to be mythical. Number 5. Do even the natural events associated with the character appear outlandish, or are they boring and mundane? If the character's life story is punctuated with outlandish or fantastic events, even though these may be natural, then the character is likely to be mythical in nature. Imagine your friend claiming that in the last 12 months, they had visited every country in the world, and every head of state of every nation had greeted them, and they had stayed in over 100 royal palaces at the invitation of kings. Now, there's nothing supernatural about this claim, but it is just very, very outlandish. And finally, number 6, do the character's traits or experiences parallel those of other characters, whether these other characters are real or mythical? If a personage has similar characteristics to somebody else, or if a personage's history is similar to somebody else's history, then it's very likely that that personage is mythical in nature. Okay, great. We've now established a framework by which to evaluate whether somebody is a real person or mythical in nature. It doesn't mean that our evaluation will always be 100% correct, but nonetheless, it is a robust framework by which to evaluate whether a character was a real human or had a mythical nature. So now, let's jump right in and start our evaluation of the Apostle Paul. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of it all, let's just take a quick moment to look at what the Bible has to say about Paul. Paul is also known as Saul of Tarsus. The primary source of information we have on Paul's life and works is the Acts of the Apostles in the New Testament. Paul wasn't one of the 12 apostles, and he didn't know Jesus during his lifetime. According to the Acts, Paul was a Pharisee, and someone who engaged in the persecution of the early disciples of Jesus around Jerusalem before his conversion. Paul is best known for the Damascus Road experience, which saw his conversion, his transformation, a veritable 180 degrees turn from being a persecutor of Christians to being one of Jesus Christ's closest followers. Paul is widely thought to be one of the leading, if not the foremost, proliferator of Christianity in the 1st century AD. So how does his character fare in our evaluation of him being a real person versus mythical? Let's start. Number 1. Are there multiple sources talking about the character, or is there just one main source, and do the multiple sources agree with each other? The main sources of information about all the apostles come from the New Testament. The Acts of the Apostles and Paul's own letters, epistles, are primary sources. The Acts of the Apostles, allegedly written by Luke, provides a detailed account of Paul's life, missionary journeys, and his role in spreading Christianity. Early Christian writers like Eusebius and Jerome also provide valuable insights into Paul's life and works. However, neither Eusebius nor Jerome were contemporaneous with Paul, and thus their writings cannot really be considered a primary source. So for number 1 in our evaluation framework, Paul leans slightly towards the mythical. Number 2, does the character have many supernatural or superhuman traits, or was the character involved in many supernatural or superhuman events? Paul was associated with several supernatural events in the Bible. Here's some of the notable ones. Conversion on the road to Damascus. Paul, then known as Saul, experienced a dramatic conversion when he encountered a bright light and heard the voice of Jesus. This event led to his transformation from a persecutor of Christians to a devoted follower of Christ, as described in Acts 9 verses 1 to 19. Paul's dramatic experience led him to become blinded. When he arrived in Damascus, Ananias, a disciple of Jesus, was able to cure him magically. Healing of the lame man. Paul healed a man who had been lame from birth in Lystra. According to the New Testament, this miracle led the people to believe that Paul and his companion Barnabas were gods. Acts 14 verses 8 to 10. Casting out a spirit of divination. In Philippi, Paul cast out a spirit of divination from a slave girl, which angered her owners and led to Paul and Silas being imprisoned. Acts 16 verses 16 to 18. Earthquake in prison. While imprisoned in Philippi, an earthquake occurred, opening the prison doors and loosening the chains of all the prisoners. This event led to the conversion of the jailer and his household. Acts 16 verses 25 to 34. Surviving a snakebite. On the island of Malta, Paul was bitten by a venomous snake but suffered no harm. According to the Bible, the islanders initially thought he was a criminal, but later believed he was a god. Acts 28 verses 3 to 6. Visions and revelations. Paul had several visions and revelations, including being caught up to the third heaven and receiving divine revelations that shaped his teachings. 2 Corinthians 12 verses 1 to 7. Well, as we can see, Paul was involved in quite a lot of supernatural or superhuman events. Accordingly, we have to score Paul as being strongly mythical on evaluation criterion number 2. Let's move on to number 3. Are the human origins of the character verifiable or not? No, not really. There's no way to verify whether Paul's life story is true or not. But interestingly, writing on Paul's biography, Jerome, in his De Viris Illustribus in 392 AD mentions that Paul was buried in the Ostian Way at Rome. In 2002, an 8-foot-long marble sarcophagus, inscribed with the words Paulo Apostolo Mart, which translates as Paul Apostle Martyr, was discovered during excavations around the Basilica of St. Paul outside the walls, on the Via Ostiensis. Vatican archaeologists declared this to be the tomb of Paul the Apostle in 2006. In 2009, Pope Benedict XVI announced that radiocarbon dating of bone fragments found in the sarcophagus indicated they were from the 1st or 2nd century, aligning with the traditional timeline of Paul's life. The Pope argued that this discovery, along with other artifacts such as a piece of purple linen laminated with pure gold, grains of incense, and blue textiles with linen filaments, all support the hypothesis that the remains are indeed those of St. Paul. However, Alderico Santamaria, the head of the Vatican Museum's Diagnostics Laboratory and a professor with expertise in analytical chemistry and materials engineering at Tushy University, urged caution, noting that the dating neither confirms nor invalidates the relic's traditional assignment to St. Paul. Even if the remains are of a 1st century person, this finding in no way validates the claim that it is indeed Paul the Apostle, nor his life story, as recorded in the New Testament. So, for number 3, we again have to score Paul in the mythical category, albeit somewhat marginally. Number 4, does the character's life story look like it's been written to fill a literary objective, or does it appear natural and spontaneous, as we'd expect for an everyday, normal person? Yes, it absolutely does fill a literary objective. The objective is to show readers that the sworn enemy of the Christians, of Jesus Christ, was able to do an amazing 180 degrees turn and become one of his closest followers. And there's a message in this story as well. The message is, don't persecute the Christians, and this is clearly a message for the Jews. Don't attack the Christians. Don't kill them. Just stop persecuting them. The message is very clear, it is not to be aggressive towards the Christians. So the conclusion is, unambiguously, that the story does have a literary objective. And therefore for number 4, we must again score Paul in the mythical category. Number 5, do even the natural events associated with the character appear outlandish, or are they boring and mundane? For this one, I'm going to refer the viewer to the excellent work of historian Ken Humphreys. His YouTube channel JesusNeverExistd has several videos on Paul, showing the ridiculous and absurd nature of Paul's travels and persecution by the Romans. I'd urge viewers to look into these videos, as they illustrate the absurdity in the biblical narrative much better than I could ever hope to do. And of course, we're going to score Paul strongly as mythical in relation to this criterion, number 5. Number 6, do the characters' traits or experiences parallel those of other characters, whether these other characters are real or mythical? Yes, they do. There is a very interesting tale of Paul's shipwreck, as given in the book of Acts, chapter 27. The chapter provides an account of Paul's journey by sea, the storm they encountered, and the eventual shipwreck on the island of Malta. But not many people know that Josephus, the personage whom it is claimed was a Jewish historian, experienced a similar shipwreck in the Adriatic Sea. He was on his way to Rome when the ship he was on sank. Josephus and about 600 others swam for their lives throughout the night. By morning, they were rescued by a ship from Cyrene. Biblical scholar Robert News notes many similarities between Josephus' own shipwreck and that of Paul. A Roman procurator, Felix, is involved in both accounts. Jewish religious leaders are involved in both accounts. Felix causes Jewish religious leaders to be imprisoned. Felix's actions result in prisoners going to Rome. The Jewish religious leaders are unjustly accused. The journey to Rome is by ship. The sea journey to Rome seeks to effect justice at the imperial level, to undo injustice done at the provincial level. The ship sinks. The heroes, Josephus or Paul, act with courage and provide leadership. Both heroes pass through Puteoli, which was a harbour city located on the north side of the Gulf of Naples, known today as Pozzuoli. How interesting! And what a coincidence that these accounts should be so similar. Indeed, as well as raising the question whether Paul was a real human or mythical, it also leads us to question whether Josephus was a real person. But perhaps, that's the topic for another video. Anyway, in conclusion, there can be no doubt that events in the life of Paul are paralleled by events in the life of Josephus, and therefore we have no option but to mark Paul as a very strong mythical in this criterion, number 6. Well, there you have it. A quick recap shows that using our framework, Paul comes out very strongly as a mythical figure. We scored him as mythical in each of the 6 evaluation criteria. He's a figure of storytelling, a fabrication, a result of tall tales. Perhaps that's not a total surprise, but it does show how using an evaluation framework can take the emotion and the guessing out of the research. We hope to deploy this evaluation technique again in the future to investigate the life stories of many other biblical characters, and eventually perhaps, characters from other religions too. Thanks for watching. We hope you've enjoyed this video.